nonprofit organization, and our mission is twofold. The first part of our mission is to give a home to birds of prey that have been injured in the wild, and because they have disabilities from their injury, they are no longer able to survive in the wild. So we give them a forever home at our sanctuary, and in exchange for wonderful care, they come to work with us. And for us, work is volunteer work, but our work is doing environmental and outdoor education. And so the birds are our education ambassadors.
Okay. And anything you want to say about the video?
Oh, sure, yeah. It is a video that we did as an answer to the challenges with getting groups of people together and things like that. So last year we just put together this video, myself and some of our volunteers, and it's just a wonderful basic introduction to raptors and some of the raptors that we have at our sanctuary.
Okay. All right, so we're going to try out this video, and you'll see Rob in the prominent screen. Let me know if the sound is okay. Hopefully this will be good.
So it's time for some birds. We've got 5 awesome birds for you to meet today. And all 5
you might need to turn up your sound on your computer.
Birds that you would see in this area, birds all throughout Wisconsin. We're going to start things out. We've got 2 falcons to start with. And the first one is pretty much a signature species when we think of falcons. It's the peregrine falcon. So come on over, Amy. We've got 5 birds and a couple members of our raptor team handling the birds to meet you guys today. So this very first bird, his name is Rocky, and he is a male peregrine falcon. As we bring out the different birds for you to meet today, really look at the difference in shape and body size and things like that. You can really compare the difference from one bird to another. A bird like Rocky here, this peregrine falcon, these guys are designed for speed, as all the members of the falcon family are. So you look at his body shape and the way his feathers are, they're all very tightly compacted to his body. Very hard, very dense feathers. That's what they use to generate speed for hunting. Some animals use camouflage to help them out when they hunt. Some birds use stealth and quietness. Falcons don't have camo. They're not very quiet. They use pure speed to capture their prey. And that speed helps them capture their main prey, which are other birds. So falcons are bird hunters. A bird like this peregrine falcon is a migratory bird, so we don't have them in the wintertime here in Wisconsin, but they leave in the fall and they come back again in the spring. They are one of the great environmental success stories all throughout North America. There was a time when these guys were really suffering the effects of chemicals like DDT in the environment, and their populations were down to very, very few animals. In fact, east of the Mississippi River, they don't even believe there are any breeding pairs left. There was still some out west, but once we got our environment cleaned up, and yay, Wisconsin, we were the very first state to ban the use of DDT and some of the other caustic pesticides, the environment started to clean up again. And we help these birds by reintroducing them back out into the wild. Power companies and things like that, major cities, these guys learn to adapt to skyscrapers and tall towers to their normal cliffside homes where they would put nesting boxes. And now every state east of the Mississippi River has nesting peregrine falcons, and that's wonderful. It's a wonderful recovery story on a way that we've been able to help the environment return back to nature a little bit. So these peregrine falcons, amazing animals. If somebody says, what is the fastest animal that we know of? The answer is not the cheetah. They're the fastest land animal, but the fastest animal that we know of is the peregrine falcon. They've been clocked at speeds over 200 miles per hour in a full dive chasing after prey. So they are just amazing. If you look underneath his eyes, you'll see like dark black patches. That's a sign of a falcon. Those are called malar stripes or malar streaks. You'll see it in all three of the falcons that we have here native in Wisconsin, the American kestrel, the merlin, and the peregrine falcon. All falcons have that. And it's just like the lampblack that football players or baseball players wear under their eyes. It helps cut the glare because they're chasing prey on a bright sunny day where the sun glare can really come down. So that helps darken that glare so they can see better in the bright light. Look at the really, really big feet that Rocky has. Man, they're huge relative to the size of his body. And what that does, it helps him catch his bird prey in midair. So his feet aren't powerful like an owl's or a hawk's, but they are strong enough to wrap around, and they use them like a net to wrap around their bird prey when they catch them in midair and take them down to the ground where they dispatch them quickly and take them back home again. So this is Rocky. You'll see he has a little bit of a left wing injury, and that's why he is in our care here at the sanctuary. We're not sure exactly how that injury arose, perhaps chasing prey, hitting a branch, a power line, something like that. And because the injury didn't heal up as well as it could have for him to be returned back into the wild, he does have a forever home here at Open Door Bird Sanctuary. Thank you very much, Amy and Rocky. All right, the next bird we're going to see is one of those three falcon species that are native here in Wisconsin. Not one that you see real commonly, although they do migrate and work their way through this area. The three species, remember, were kestrel, merlin, and peregrine falcon. You just met Rocky the peregrine. Now you're going to meet Sir Percival the merlin. This is Andy, one of the members of our Raptor team, and with him is Percy. And I'll be quiet for just a minute and see if Percy will make another one of those calls. Hey, Percy. How you doing, little bud? So this is Percy, and you just heard the call of the merlin. One of our volunteers, once he got to know Percy real well and recognized what that call was, he came back to the sanctuary one day and said, Rob, we've got merlins nesting near our home because I can hear them calling. That's one of the wonderful things about this area. Most merlins, like Percy, nest up in far northern Wisconsin and southern Canada, but here in Door County and many parts of this area, we do have nesting merlins, which is very cool. So you'll see he is sized much different than Rocky that you saw earlier. He is a much smaller falcon, one of the smaller falcon species that we have here in Wisconsin and all of North America. But he is designed exactly the same. He's got the same very compact body, long pointed wings that are traditional for falcons, a long fan-shaped tail that helps them maneuver and helps them get around and chase their bird prey. So a bird like Rocky chases after prey that's larger. Pigeons in the cities, man, they're wonderful snacks for a bird like a peregrine falcon, but a bird like a pigeon would be way too big for a little guy like Percy. So they go after smaller birds like songbirds and things like that, and that's their primary prey. Percy's background is very unique here at the sanctuary, and why he's here. He was found up in north central Wisconsin as a little baby, just a little nestling, still fuzzy, and some hikers found him. There was no nest in sight, nothing around, and he was starving to death. He hadn't eaten in a long time. They rescued him. We suspect he was probably taken from the nest by another bird of prey and carried off to feed to their babies, but somehow Percy got away and they didn't find him. But fortunately, those hikers did. They took him to a rehab center where he was rehabilitated, but unfortunately, his long time in human care from the time that he was a little baby caused him to be imprinted on humans. And when I say imprinted, we use the term mal-imprinted because he should be imprinted on other merlins, birds of his species. He became imprinted on human beings. So he's just way too comfortable around people, and he seeks them out for food and attention and things like that. And that's why he is in our care, because wild animals that would live out in the wild shouldn't want to go close to people. So that's why Percy is in our care. If you look underneath his eyes, you'll see those malar streaks underneath there. A little bit harder to see on a Merlin like this, but they are there. The long pointed wings, long fan-shaped tail, all characteristics. And again, if you look at the feet on this bird, for the size of this bird, his feet are tremendously large, probably even larger in proportion to his body than that peregrine falcon we saw earlier. And that's what gives him that ability to catch other birds and grab them in midair. So little songbirds and birds like that are the primary prey, but all hunters, like birds of prey, are opportunistic. So they will take anything they can. So a Merlin like this would be just as happy to grab a mouse as he would a bird or anything else that came his way. All right, thank you very much, Andy and Sir Percival. All right, so we are going to move from what we call the Fast and the Furious, the world of the Falcons, and we're going to go in exactly the opposite direction now. We're going to go not from a fighter plane, but we're going to go over to a stealth bomber. So we're going to go into the world of the owls and introduce you to two owl species that are, again, very common all throughout Wisconsin. The very first one you're going to meet is one of the newer residents here at our sanctuary, and she is just a beauty. This is Rufus, and this is a screech owl, one of the smaller owls, the second smallest owl we have native to this area. When you see screech owls, you will see them in two color phases, which is very, very unique in the world of birds of prey. There is the red phase, or rufous phase, like this, and that's where Rufus gets her name. And there is also a gray phase of the screech owl. Now, one would think that two gray parents would have a bunch of gray babies, or two red parents would have a bunch of red babies. Well, two gray parents could have four red babies. They could have 2 and 2. It's about a 50-50 mix when they hatch out of the egg, whether they're going to be the reddish color screech owl, or whether they're going to be the gray color of the screech owl. But we found through studies that here in the northern parts of North America, and these guys are widely distributed all throughout North America, in the northern part of North America, the survival rate for the gray phase of the screech owl is much, much higher. Down south, the survival rate for the red phase or rufous phase screech owls is much higher. The adult populations are about 3/4 red and 1/4 gray down south. Here in the north, they're the opposite, about 3/4 gray and about 1/4 red. It's their estimation that it's because of the cover that we have. Northern United States is predominantly hardwood forests. The gray trees, the gray bark, the gray canopy is much better camouflage for the gray or silver phase of these little screech owls. And down south, their forest cover is primarily pine forests, so the red and the green blends much better with the little red phase or rufous phase screech owls. We talk about the calls that different owls make, and the time we were young, owls say hoo hoo hoo, and not very many of them do. There are a number of hoot owls, and the next one you're going to meet is a true hoot owl, but they make all different kinds of calls. The call of this little screech owl sounds very, very similar to the whinny of a horse, and that's how they get their name, the screech owl. This is a tufted owl, so you see the little ear tufts up on top of the head, very similar to the great horned owl and other tufted owls that you see. Those little ear tufts really aren't part of hearing function or anything. They use them as camouflage to break their head. They also use them as little signal towers to other owls. So if Rufus here was very unhappy one day or alarmed or concerned, those little ear tufts would be down very close to the top of her head. But right now she's just curious and looking around and very comfortable, very relaxed. So her little ear tufts are standing up nice and tall. Again, this is the second smallest owl we have in this area. The smallest is the saw-whet owl. That is a migratory bird. Our screech owls are generally here year-round. One of the really important things that you can do out in nature and in the environment to help out a little owl like this is leave old dead trees standing. These guys are cavity nesters. They love the cavity from an pileated woodpecker, just a hollow rotten log, something like that. If you go into the woods and cut those trees down, you're losing and you're eliminating nesting sites for wonderful little birds like this screech owl. So make sure that you really think twice before cutting down those dead trees, because that's what helps give these guys a place to live and nest. And although we have a wonderful environment and great food resources all throughout Wisconsin for a beautiful little eastern screech owl like this, they still need places to nest and to reproduce. And so those old hollow trees are very, very important. So you look at the different body shape and size here, very, very different than those falcons we just saw. Boy, very puffy looking and big and round looking. So these guys, like I mentioned before, they are the stealth bombers. They are totally silent when they fly. They're very well camouflaged. They don't make a lot of sound. That's what really helps them capture their prey. Thank you very much, Amy and Rufus. So we are going to move from a very tiny little owl that's native to here in the area to the second largest species of owl that you will find here in this part of our world, in this part of Wisconsin. A very, very unique bird by lifestyle. So here comes Andy right now, and with him is Radar. And Radar is a beautiful barred owl. Not barn, but barred. It's spelled B-A-R-R-E-D. This is the second most common owl we have in this area. Hello, Radar, how are you? The second most common owl we have in this area. The most common is the great horned owl. But because we have a lot of this type of owl in the area, we see great horned owls quite regularly, but we don't often see barred owls out in the wild. And one of the reasons for that is because of the habitat and the chosen environment where they like to live. These guys are swampland dwellers. Barred owls love to be in wetlands and swamps and wooded areas with a lot of water in them. So their lifestyle is very unique for an owl. Most owls like high and dry. These guys love to live around water. In fact, when some of our followers and fans here at Open Door Bird Sanctuary send me pictures of birds they've seen, very regularly I get pictures of somebody saying, look at this owl in my bird bath. And I know before that I even see what that picture is, I'll bet you it's a barred owl, because they love to be around water, they love to bathe. Being around water, their favorite food resources are a little bit different than many of the other birds. Normally, owls in this area chase the typical prey, anything in a fur coat. So they like mice and chipmunks and bunnies and things like that. That's their desired prey. Now, these guys are great mousers in the winter. They do live in this area all year round. They don't migrate at all. So they're great mouse hunters in the wintertime. But in the summer, living in the wetland areas where they live, their primary food source is those animals that live and are around the water all the time. So frogs and salamanders, newts, toads. These barred owls are even known to go in very, very shallow water to capture prey. So they will plunge into 4, 5, 6 inches of water. They'll catch small fish and minnows and tadpoles and things like that. Very, very unique behavior for an owl. If you look closely at Radar's head, you won't see those ear tufts that you would see on a great horned owl, or like you just saw on Rufus, the eastern screech owl. This is a tuftless owl, so they don't have the ear tufts. On the face, you'll see a beautiful facial disc of feathers. So owls, of course, don't have big ears like I have to capture sound and send it into my head, but they have this wonderful facial disc of feathers all around their head, and that's what replaces these ears that I have, and that's how they capture sound, and it focuses the sound and takes it back to their ears so they can hear. So she can hear very, very well. owls have amazing hearing because they are nocturnal. And, speaking of nighttime, most owls are what we call crepuscular. So daytime hunters are animals that are active during the day. That's a diurnal animal. Truly nocturnal animals that come out only in the darkest part of night, that's nocturnal. But crepuscular is animals that come out at dawn and dusk in low light conditions. And that's what most owls are. The little eastern screech owl, the great horned owl, owls that we see in this area. If you look at Radar's eyes, you won't see any color in her eyes. You won't see the colored iris and the dark pupil in the middle. All you see is just a deep, dark sea of black and dark, dark brown. That indicates to us this is truly, truly a nocturnal bird. Now, they do come out at dawn and dusk occasionally, but the primary time of activity for them is in the darkest part of the night. 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, 2 in the morning. That's when they're really active and out hunting. So their eyesight is tremendous at night. Their hearing is tremendous. And again, being a stealth bomber, their camouflage is great. And when they see prey, they silently glide down and grab that prey and take it away. Thank you very much, Radar and Andy. All right, so we are going to move from falcons to owls to a wonderful species and one of my favorite birds in the world. Sometimes these birds haven't gotten the best reports and reviews from people, but I'll tell you what, they serve a very, very important function in our environment. And what I think is great is they're one of the very first signs of spring here in Door County in Wisconsin, because they're a migratory bird. I'm not talking about the robin, I'm talking about the turkey vulture. And here comes Amy with Amber, our resident turkey vulture. Hello, Amber. How are you? So this is Amber. And Amber is a female turkey vulture. She is a wonderful resident here at Open Door Bird Sanctuary. She is a great education bird. She's one of the birds that people are just so happy to meet and see up close. And like I said, sometimes vultures get a bad rap. People think they're smelly or gross or, dirty and things like that. One of the most wonderful things we can do as an education facility is share a bird like Amber with people and give them an up close and personal opportunity to meet a bird like this. And they see Amber and they see the many, many colors of her feather, from rusty brown to chocolate brown. There's purples and blues and blacks in her feathers. And they see her face and they say, wow, they're not so ugly. And geez, I'm standing really close and boy, I don't think, let's see. Hey, she doesn't smell bad, so some of those things that we learn about animals like this really are just things that people kind of made up. Vultures are very, very clean animals. They spend many, many, many hours preening and cleaning themselves because you guys all know what the job of a vulture is out in the wild. They're scavengers. They're not hunters. If you look at Amber's feet, she does have talon-like nails on her feet, but she doesn't have those grippy, squeezing, grabbing feet for hunting. Those feet don't squeeze or grab at all. They're just exactly that. They're a scavenger. They are meat eaters, but they are just scavengers. They help clean up our environment. They are the original recyclers that are out there in the environment. So if it wasn't for animals like turkey vultures, boy, if we went for a hike out on the property here, when hiking out in nature, man, we'd be tripping and stumbling over dead stuff left and right because nobody cleaned it up. But these turkey vultures do an amazing job of helping to clean up the environment. Very, very few birds have a true sense of smell. Vultures have an extremely good sense of smell. One of the largest olfactory systems of all birds that are out there. And they use smell for locating their next meal. They can fly a mile up above the ground and smell some fetid meat down on the ground. They'll fly down, they'll check it out, they'll investigate it. Now, one of the other kind of misnomers about these guys is that they like to eat rotten food. They don't. They like to eat fresh food just as much as we do. But the rotten parts of the food help them locate it. They will open up the carcass, they will go in as far as they can to get the freshest and most best preserved meat that's in there. And if you look at amber or look at photographs of vultures, you notice, geez, there's no feathers on their head. Amber just has a little bit of fuzz up there, but no true feathers on her head. Well, the top of your head and the sides of your head are one of the hardest parts to keep clean for a bird. And when you think of their lifestyle, going inside of carcasses to get that fresh meat that's left inside of there, that tends to get pretty dirty up there. So by not having many feathers on their head, it gives them the opportunity to stay much cleaner and helps them clean themselves. Another behavior that you see from turkey vultures like this is sunning themselves. And I'm surprised, we've got a little bit of sun shining now. I'm surprised Amber doesn't have her wings out, but very, very common behavior you see from these turkey vultures is you watch them out on a sunny day, they've got their wings spread out as far as they can be, and they will just be sunning themselves. And it does a number of things for them. The sunning behavior is something they use first thing in the morning to help warm their body up, get their muscles ready for flight and everything. But because of those beautiful dark feathers that they have, when they sun themselves, their feathers will warm up a lot. In fact, their body will get so warm that it will get too warm for parasites, and the parasites will leave their body. So it is another way for them to stay clean and be clean. These guys are amazing flyers, and starting in the early spring and all summer until fall, when we have vultures out in this area, sometimes it's hard to tell them from some of the other large gliding birds that we see out up in the skies. Well, there's a couple ways to really identify what a vulture is when you see them flying by. Eagles are very oftenly mistaken for vultures and vice versa. Eagles have a little bit larger wingspan, and when an eagle glides, their wings are perfectly straight out, left and right, as straight as can be. When a vulture glides, and vultures can glide literally for hours without flapping their wings, when they glide, their wings are always in a V shape like this. It's called a dihedral shape, and that V shape is what helps them glide for hours. So when you see a bird gliding up in the sky, and the wings are kind of V-shaped like this, and you see them teetering back and forth in the wind, you know that that's a turkey vulture you're watching up in the sky. Um, so yes, these are wonderful birds to have around, wonderful birds to have in our environment. Their populations are very strong in the wild. Their migrations are very strong. These guys are nesting all the way up into southern Canada now, so their populations are doing really, really well. We can give all of ourselves a pat on the back for that, for having a good, healthy, clean environment that really helps these birds and all the other birds of prey and birds and animals that are out there, helps their populations to be sustained and to increase. All right, thank you very much, Amber, and thank you very much, Amy. So I hope you enjoyed this little presentation we've done for you from Open Door Bird Sanctuary. We had a fun time doing it. Again, special thanks to Andy and Amy, two members of our Raptor team that were handling birds today. Extra special thanks to Mike, a member of our Raptor team who is doing all the filming and handling the camera. Sure appreciate all the volunteers we have here at Open Door Bird Sanctuary. So again, if you'd like to come out and visit us, we'd love to have you come out. We're open summer Saturdays from noon until 4 o'clock with a wonderful bird show at 1. If you'd like to set up a private tour to come and visit Open Door Bird Sanctuary, you can go to our website at opendoorbirdsanctuary.org. And follow us on Facebook too. We've got some wonderful posts up there. We post things on a very regular basis. And so stay in touch. We'll be in touch. And we hope to see you soon. Be well and take care.
Well, thanks, Rob. I hope that sound and everything came out good for everybody. You can let us know and let Rob know, so when he shows that, you have any suggestions. And so we left purposely left plenty of time for questions because we figured people would have questions. So feel free to unmute yourself and ask Rob any questions you have.
Rob, this is Roz. Great presentation. I just you didn't give the background of the owls or the vulture as to why they were in the sanctuary.
Oh, sure. The first little owl, the little screech owl, she had, and it was pretty obvious when you see her, she had a left eye injury. And so that was, when she was rescued, she was very thin and very gaunt, and her eye injury was quite fresh at that time. So they knew that's what was preventing her from feeding properly. So once they got her fed up and all fat and sassy again, then she was placed at our sanctuary for education. They knew she couldn't be released again. Radar, the barred owl, she had a collision with a car, but she did not get hit by a car. She actually ran into the side of a car. Excuse me. She was chasing prey that went across the road, and she didn't see the car coming, and the car got there before she did, and she ran into the side of the car. No broken bones or anything, but what happened is owls fly face first, and that face first impact with the side of the car gave her detached retinas in her eyes. So she can see, but just not well enough to be a hunter out in the wild. And then the third bird, Amber, she is the worst possible reason that we could have a bird at our sanctuary. Amber is perfectly physically intact. She has no injuries, no nothing. Her disability is a mental one as opposed to physical one. Some people took her from the nest when she was a little baby and thought it would be cool to have a pet vulture. Crazy people out there, but they realized as she was starting to grow up a little bit and was getting into adolescence that she wasn't very healthy. They didn't really know how to take care of a vulture. They figured out vultures don't make good pets. And ultimately, they left her on the doorstep in a big cardboard box of a rehab facility, and they put a note on the box, and they left her there in the dead of night because they didn't want to get caught. They knew that what they had done was very illegal. Fortunately, they did get her into good care. At the rehab facility, they attempted to introduce her to some resident vultures at that facility. They did introduce her because she was still young enough yet, and they hoped that if she would blend in with those vultures, that she could be released back into the wild, because that's the goal. When they put her in with their resident vultures, they just beat the tar out of her, and they knew that she was different, that she didn't know how to speak vulture language or act like a vulture properly, and had that happened in the wild, they very likely could have killed her. But fortunately, it was in a supervised setting, and they got Amber out of there. But they knew at that point that she couldn't be released back to the wild because she was so imprinted on humans. To me, that's really a very sad state of affairs. You know, we can feel quite good and noble that we're giving a home to birds that have had some type of, true physical injury. But a bird like Amber, we have an American kestrel named Ginger that's the same way. Somebody was selfish and dumb and, did something really bad, taking a baby wild animal out of the wild and thinking that it would make a good pet. And once they do that, they can't be returned back to the wild. So that's why those three birds are at our sanctuary.
Thank you, Rob.
Rob,
Yes.
you talked about the differential survival rates on the screech owls between the red ones and the white ones, that the ones that match their their background survive better. Is something hunting those that they're hiding from, or does it make it easier for them to catch prey if they can spring out of the background unobserved?
It's a combination of both, really. And so the better camouflage you are, the easier it is to sneak up on your prey. But one of the things that is very common in the world of wild animals, even though you are a predator, doesn't mean you're always at the top of the food chain. And so if you are a small predator like a screech owl, they can fall prey to a Cooper's hawk, a sharp-shinned hawk, a peregrine falcon, barred owl, a great horned owl, you know, so they, because they're little, they can be prey for somebody else. And so their, you know, their survival rates, if they're better camouflaged, are much higher.
I have a question. How do you keep the birds in the sanctuary?
They are in aviaries. So if we have all of the birds that would live outdoors naturally all year round are outdoors all year round. Our migratory birds are in their outdoor aviaries throughout the spring, summer, and fall, but then we have indoor aviaries with climate control for them in the wintertime as migratory birds. But they are all in aviaries. They're free flighted or free lofted, so we don't keep them tethered onto perches or anything like that. They can fly around inside. Each one has their own individual aviary. And then we work with them, and we train them and work with them to become education ambassadors. And our birds work with us of their own free will. So when we go into one of their aviaries, if Mrs. Jones calls me up from the second grade teacher in Sturgeon Bay and says, "We're studying raptors. We would like you to bring a red-tailed hawk and a barn owl." And sometimes I'll show up with a red-tailed hawk and a great horned owl. And they said, "Geez, we really want to just see the barn owl." And maybe the barn owl didn't want to go that day. so we really do. We give our birds free will. They work with us, you know, by choice, not by force. And I think it creates a very good and healthy environment for them to be in.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Have you ever had birds mate, or did you want to ever try to increase I don't know if you get to a male and female of the same species. Has that ever happened with your
We do.
group?
One of the things, all of the work that we do at Open Door Bird Sanctuary is all regulated by the federal government. It's the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And we have a stack of permits. If I pile them up, would probably be about waist high to take care of all these birds. If we did allow any of our birds to reproduce, we would lose every permit that we have. So one of the things, they're very cautious. Generally speaking, bird of prey populations are very healthy in the wild. There are a couple that may be threatened or maybe a little bit lower on the scale, and sometimes it happens regionally, like kestrels are very, very healthy in our area. There are other parts of North America where kestrels aren't doing so well, and they're getting a little bit more rare, but it's regional. Here in Wisconsin and most places, populations of great horned owls and red-tailed hawks and barred owls are very, very strong, and there's no need at all to breed them in captivity. And so one of the things that they want to make sure of too is that these birds don't ultimately become a commodity. And when I say that, we are known at our sanctuary for giving a home to birds that aren't necessarily beautiful. There are some education facilities that just want to have very beautiful birds, like like Amber, who is a perfect bird. But we have birds with goofy eyes and goofy wings, and their feathers don't grow right because of their injuries, and we're fine with that. But we have for example, we have a male and a female great horned owl named Gracie and Blackbeard, and neither one of them is a particularly attractive bird. If we allowed them to reproduce, we would get perfect babies. And we could talk to another facility, an education facility, and said, "Hey, we'll trade you a perfect great horned owl in exchange for a screech owl," or something like that. And they just, because the populations are so healthy out in the wild, they want to make sure that nobody's breeding them in captivity.
Thanks.
What do you feed the birds?
Well, that's a great question. So we do try to replicate what they would get out in the wild as close as we can. So we study on what that bird might eat in the wild. It's pretty easier than you would think. And like I had mentioned during that little video program, most of the hawks and owls and birds like that like to eat anything wearing a fur coat. And a mammal is a mammal is a mammal for the most part. So whether they're rabbit eaters or squirrel eaters or mice and rats or things like that, one mammal's pretty much the same. So a lot of our birds that are mammal hunters get a pretty steady diet of rats and mice. And we do not feed them any live prey. All of the food that they get, we purchase, and it comes to us. There's a company down in Indiana called Rodent Pro, and they raise mice and rats and things like that for zoos and aviaries to feed to animals. They come to us. The UPS guy drops a couple of boxes off, and the mice and rats are all frozen and packaged, and then whatever we're going to feed the following day, I get those out of the freezer in the evening. They thaw out overnight, and then they're ready to feed to our birds. Some of the other birds at the sanctuary, and we have everything from tiny little owls and falcons, medium-sized birds like the red-tailed hawks and great horned owls. We have 2 eagles at our sanctuary. We have a bald eagle and a golden eagle. Different diets for different birds. So for example, the peregrine falcon that you saw, or Percy the merlin, we have 2 merlins at our sanctuary. They are almost exclusively bird hunters in the wild. So a big part of their diet is quail. So we do purchase quail from a breeder out in Pennsylvania, and he sends us quail all packaged up and frozen. And so they have delicious food like that. Our eagles get a real varied diet. They get our bald eagle. We work with the fish hatchery out of Sturgeon Bay. When they harvest salmon in the fall and spring for the eggs, they save us a lot of the salmon that we can feed to our bald eagle. So very natural, very healthy. They love salmon. They get a good share of venison. We work with the county highway department, and when we need some more venison at the sanctuary, they will find us one that was hit by a car the night before, and they drop it off at our sanctuary. We debone it and get it all prepared and put it in the freezer so they get venison. Lots of different foods. We work with breeders of rabbits that do show rabbits, and of course they are very particular on the rabbits that they use for showing, and so they have culls that aren't the best rabbits that they want to show. We get a lot of their culls, and so they freeze them and send them to us. So, you know, any way we can save a couple bucks and not have to purchase food for the birds, it's awesome. But they get a very varied diet and keeps them really, really healthy.
If you only feed them dead animals, how do they know to go out and kill their own when you release them from the wild? They're going to sit around and wait for somebody to come and feed them their carefully prepared meals, or they have to learn to go out and kill their prey, don't they?
Well, all of the birds that we have at our sanctuary are all birds that will never ever be able to survive in the wild on their own. So they are, if we give them a forever home at our sanctuary because of their disabilities. And one thing too that a lot of people don't realize is all predatory animals will very readily scavenge if given the opportunity. So if there's free food that you don't have to put effort into getting, man, you take advantage of it. You know, and in the wild, any calorie you lose, and if you're a predator, hunting costs you a ton of calories. It takes a lot of energy and burns a lot of calories. If you're a hunter, you use a lot of calories to capture food, and then you have to replace those calories again. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. And you know, that's why you see red-tailed hawks on the wrong side of the road eating roadkill, because man, if you can get a free meal, I'm the same way. If I was walking down the street and somebody said, "Hey, have a free hamburger," I'm like, "Hey, I'll take it, sure."
I have a question about, I'm sure you have to have a thorough training for all your volunteers, but I was watching them holding the birds, and I saw the gloves that they're wearing for the sharp talons, but I was wondering about their faces and how close the birds are. I mean, have there been, you don't have to tell me, but have there been any weird accidents, or have the birds ever, you know, I don't know. I mean, I know that they're acclimatized to people eventually and everything, but do they ever peck
No,
out
and
of turn?
no, and that's a really good question. So one of the things, I do all of the initial and the primary training and work when a new bird comes into the sanctuary. Um, and ultimately, none of these birds are our friends. They don't behave like our friends. They're not socialized at all. And in the wild, they're not anyhow. You know, a red-tailed hawk doesn't hang out with other red-tailed hawks. They're the enemy. So these birds are normally very solitary out in the wild other than breeding and mating season. What we do is we work very hard to earn their trust and we earn their confidence. And that's as close a relationship as we'll ever have. Sometimes it's hard to say, but most of these birds could probably care less if they ever see me again. So there isn't really a bonded relationship there. It's really a matter of trust and confidence. With raptors like we have, number one, you never really have to worry about the beak, it's the feet. They don't peck at anything. They're, you know, not like a, like a pecking bird. They don't do that. If they are feel a need to defend themselves for some reason, it's their feet that they use, and their feet can be very, very dangerous. And if you get a chance to see any of that video again, if you look at the way those birds are sitting on the gloves and working with their handlers, their feet are very, very relaxed. They're not squeezing, they're not gripping or anything like that. And we wear the gloves for a couple reasons. Yes, the needles the talons are needle sharp, and we'd all end up with little tiny holes all over our hands from handling them. It's also the glove is a much more comfortable place for the bird to stand because our skin moves all around. And so it would be a very unsteady place for a bird to be, but the glove is nice and firm and it gives them a comfortable place to stand. That barred owl that Amy was holding, they have about 150 pounds of crushing strength in their feet. Even though we're wearing those leather gloves, if they wanted to and they put all their force into your hand, they would snap fingers. So we trust them just as much as they trust us, and I think it's a very mutual thing. And but I have never experienced an intentional injury, nor have any of my volunteers from one of our education birds.
Good.
It is.
One more question. Those little tiny predator birds, your merlin and so on, do they eat grasshoppers too?
Merlins would, and like I mentioned, they are opportunistic. So if there's a meal there, they will. A very similar size falcon that we have in Wisconsin, the American kestrel, they are big insectivores. Kestrels have taken a tangent away from most of the other members of the falcon family. Very rarely do kestrels catch birds. They do occasionally, but very rarely. Kestrels are almost exclusively mousers, but they're very, very opportunistic, and they eat big flying grasshoppers, they eat dragonflies, they eat snakes. I mean, kestrels will catch a lot of different things, and they are very much in the insectivore category too, because they will eat a lot of big bugs, and bugs are full of fat and protein, and they're really, really good for birds. So if they can get them and it makes a good snack or a good meal, they will.
What are the lifespans for these birds?
Oh, that's a really good question too. So in the wild, the smaller you are, generally the shorter your lifespan is. So if you look at a small owl like you saw, like the little screech owl, in the wild, 5 to 7 years is about the lifespan of a screech owl. In human care, with good human care, not just any human care, but good human care, their lifespan will usually double. A good example is we had, until about a year ago, she passed away about a year ago, but we had a little saw-whet owl, and she weighed about 4 to 5 ounces, and she stood about this tall. It's about 4 or 5 inches tall. In the wild, again, 5, 6 years, that's her lifespan. When she passed away at our sanctuary, she was 13 and a half years old. So they really, it's a much safer environment if you have good care and exercise and good food. It's much safer than being out in the wild. As you get into the larger birds, the lifespans expand dramatically. Birds like our two eagles, our bald eagle or our golden eagle, both of them are young adolescents. They're both 6 or 7 years old. Each of them could live to be 40 to 50 years old in human care. Um, so, when we at the sanctuary offer to give a home to a bird like that, it's not just for the bird's lifetime. I'm 60 years old, and those eagles could live another 40 years. If I've got 40 years in me, happy days. So it's not just a lifetime commitment for the birds, it's a lifetime commitment for me and those who follow after me at Open Door Bird Sanctuary. So it's not just because it'd be cool to have an eagle for a couple of years. It's a significant commitment to make sure that you have housing and care and people that can work with them and food and all that stuff.
So,
Speaking of eagles, they have golden eagles in in North America, but there's also golden eagles in Mongolia or in Asia. Are these the same species? Do they ever like fly over the Arctic and go back and forth between Asia and North America?
They are the same species, yes, and there are a number of species of raptors where it's the same bird all over the world. Peregrine falcon is one of those. They're on every single continent except Antarctica, and it's exactly the same species of peregrine falcon. Long-eared owls are another one. We just recently welcomed a long-eared owl to Open Door Bird Sanctuary. They have them in Europe and Ireland and all over the place. It's the same long-eared owl that you would see here in North America. Golden eagles are the same way. It's the same golden eagle.
Doesn't that mean they have to interchange so they don't get isolated?
Well, it does. Now, if you got really, really scientific and very possibly the genetic makeup of a golden eagle that lives in Colorado could be slightly different than one in Mongolia or in Ireland or a location like that. They are the same species, but you can have little differences if you do have very isolated populations of them. But being the same species, if you took a golden eagle from Colorado and a golden eagle from Northern Ireland, a male and female, and put them together, they would be able to breed and reproduce. Whereas, other species, there are a number of different species of kestrel throughout the world. They would not be able to reproduce because they are actually, even though they're called kestrels, they're different species.
so do you have any tips for finding owls to look at in the wild? We do a lot of looking at birds. We live up on the north side of Madison. We're near marshland. We've got all kinds of water around us. And boy, I see eagles, I see red-tailed hawks, I see all sorts of, stuff. But
Yeah.
the darn owls, the only owls that I've actually seen here have been in Albert Park, that's sort of it.
Sure.
Are like, I don't understand why we don't see them.
Well, most owls, great horned owls are awesome because they are very comfortable around populated areas. I mean, you see great horned owls in downtown Chicago and Madison and Milwaukee and all over the place. They don't care where they live too much. So they're an owl. They're very gregarious. They're very noisy. They're one of the easiest ones to see. Barred owls are a little bit tougher because, frankly, a lot of it has to do with their chosen environment. My wife and I love to hike. Very rarely do we look for the nearest swamp to go hiking in. So we don't run across areas as much with birds like barred owls. Their camouflage is so good. You see a little screech owl or a saw-whet owl or even a barred owl. They hug up against a tree and they love to sit in big pine trees because there's so much good cover there. Man, if you're not looking with binoculars up and down every pine tree that you see, it's going to be really hard to spot them. One of the best times that you can see owls, if you want to see them, is we're getting a little bit late now, but we start doing owl calling usually around Christmas time.
Huh.
And barred owls are a little bit later in the year, but the very first nesters and territorial breeding birds in our area are great horned owls. And they get very, very vocal starting around Christmas time and through mid-February, end of January, mid-February. I live in a little woods. I have a little tiny deck on the back of my house. I can go out and sit on my little deck at night and actually call great horned owls in with my voice.
Wow.
Just by mimicking a great horned owl's hooting call, and they'll reply to me, and then I do it back, and they reply to me again, and they're a little bit closer, and because they want to know who's in their territory. And eventually I'll just see their silhouette land in a leafless tree, you know, in the wintertime. And they look down at me sitting on the deck and they say, well, you're no owl. And they turn around and off they go. But that's actually a really good time because they do respond very well to calling. And about a month later, so usually beginning of February into the end of March is when the barred owls start getting very active and, you know, seeking mates and seeking territories. So they respond to calls a lot better too then. So sometimes going out and seeing them is hard, but there is a possibility of actually calling them into you.
Could you do the call for us?
Sure. So one of the things, and I mentioned it a little bit in the video presentation, was that, you know, since we were little kids, we learned that owls say hoot hoot. They really don't. Not very many of them are true hoot owls, but barred owls and great horned owls are both hoot owls. The tenor and the tone of their voice is very similar. So it's hard to identify them sometimes unless you listen to the cadence of their call. And so to remember one owl from another, we have put words to the cadence because the cadence is almost always the same for that species of owl. Great horned owl has a little bit shorter cadence to their call. The words we put to it is, I'm awake, are you? Ooh, 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 ooh. And it'll be that very similar call almost every time. And sometimes they'll tweak it a little bit and add a note or take a note away. But that I'm awake, are you is a very positive way to identify a great horned owl if you hear it. Barred owls have a little bit longer cadence to their call. And you may have heard this. The words that they put to it are who cooks for you, who cooks for you all. And so their call sounds like, whoo, 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 whoo. And so that is the call of a barred owl.
Thank you.
So, and like I said, the cadence is almost the same every time. They do make some really cool apps for phones that you can use. I have used them to identify birds in people's yards. When you hear a bird calling or, you know, singing loudly, generally that's for territorial reasons, mating reasons, things like that. And if you can reproduce that sound, you'll usually get them to call back and very often come close to you. And I've had people that have said, you know, send me little recordings of birds like, we don't know what this call is or what this sound is. And I would say, take that little recording outside, put the volume up 100% on your computer and play it. And they've actually called those birds in and been able to either observe them or take a picture of them and send it to me so that I can identify it then. But, you know, they're very, very responsive to calls.
Oh. Thank you.
You're welcome.
You were saying about building trust with the birds. Do you, I know that they did some tests on crows recognizing people's faces and cranes maybe recognizing how people approached. Do you know if the birds recognized individual people and who they are?
Very, very much. Yes. And they, birds of prey particularly, and you mentioned facial recognition, are really strong on facial recognition. Our birds at the sanctuary will literally pick and choose who they will work with. There, we have volunteers that, you know, oh, I would love to work with Radar the barred owl. Radar might not like that particular person, and it's not because they ever did anything mean or wrong or bad. They really do. They pick and choose who they will work with. Some birds ultimately ended up being much more male or female oriented, where they will very comfortably work with any guy that walks in there, but they're very alarmed or very concerned around women. There are some that are the exact opposite, where, you know, any woman that walks in there, they're like, hey, let's go hang out. But a guy walks in and they're like, oh, get away from me. So it really, they do have personalities. One of the things in talking about facial recognition and stuff, you know, these are wild animals. They're not domesticated. They, like I said, they allow us into their world a little bit on a daily basis, but that's about it. And because they're smaller than us and they recognize human beings as being big predators, and big predators are scary, one of the things that we did have to put a lot of work into was using positive reinforcement and positive conditioning to get the birds used to people wearing masks. Because when because they are very big on facial recognition, but B, when a predator hides everything but their eyes, that means they're hunting. That means they're stalking, and that's very unnerving to an animal. So it took us a long time. We all wore masks around our neck, and then we would wear the mask up on our chin, and then the mask would be over our mouth, and eventually we had it up over our nose. Just that very gradual process over a number of weeks, just so the birds would get adjusted to it. And they did, and there's still a couple of them that think it's kind of weird, but for the most part, they've gotten very comfortable with it.
Yeah. Well, that's an interesting COVID story that I hadn't heard.
Yeah, it's a unique one, yeah.
Rob, do you have a favorite resident?
I do. It's Amber the turkey vulture.
Uh,
So one of the things, and I mentioned it earlier, that most of these birds, if they never saw me again, could care less. You know, I'm the food guy and I clean up and things like that, and I work with them, but you know, there's no real friendship there. There's no bond. They trust me and I trust them, and that's about it. And that's okay. You know, I'm not looking for anything more than that. Vultures are very different, and that's one of the reasons they can be very, very enjoyable to work with. The birds, the hawks and the owls and birds like that, mentally, they don't even have the wiring in their head for socialization. It's unnecessary. And if you don't need it in the wild, Mother Nature doesn't give it to you. So they don't have any acuity, any ability for socialization. Vultures, on the other hand, are highly socialized out in the wild. They always hang out with other vultures. They have very strict rituals with other vultures in that. So a bird like Amber, the turkey vulture, they are extremely intelligent. They have a socialization value and an intelligence very similar to a parrot. So very interactive. Amber loves to play games. She loves toys when I put them in by her. When I'm cleaning in her aviary, I found out that she thought it was just a scream to come down and steal stuff out of the wash bucket. She would take the sponge out and tear it into pieces, and she'd run away with my little scraper. And just, so what I've done now is I have an old beat up towel, and I put that up on her perch, and man, she loves pulling and tugging on that old towel, and it keeps her busy while I'm cleaning below her. And so we even play tug of war when I'm in there. Boy, she'll get all wound up and flap her wings, and I'll grab the other end of the towel, and she's on her perch, and boy, we just play tug of war for quite a while. And she looks forward to that on cleaning days because it's fun interaction and it's things to do. And so it's really enjoyable to actually interact with a bird like that. And Amber is one of the few birds at our sanctuary that is capable of flight because she doesn't have any of those physical injuries. And not only that, she is imprinted on human beings, so she's very comfortable around people. And I do have Amber trained for free flight, so I can take Amber out allow her to fly around on occasion. And when I put my glove up and give a little whistle and tap on my glove, she glides back down and lands back on my glove again. So for me to have that type of interaction is pretty rewarding.
How old is she and how old will she be?
Amber, I think, boy, everybody's testing me with these ages. I got 17 kids at the sanctuary and I don't remember all their ages. Amber, I think, is about 7 years old this year. And her lifespan could be up to 40 years. So she likely will be around for a long time. Sorry about
One thing I have heard about when you were talking about the birds doing the bird calls, people have said, naturalists have said, it's not good to repeat them too often, the same one in a certain area in one section of the woods, because if you continuously play it more than a few times, that bird may think another male, say, is in its territory, and it may actually end up leaving that area of the woods because it feels that someone's invaded their territory. So you have to be a little bit careful about not playing a tape of bird sound too often in one area.
I think it's probably a very valid point. And one of the other things that I tell both my volunteers and I tell visitors to the sanctuary and stuff, because that's something that people like to do, is replicate the sound that the animal is making. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen somebody walk past a pasture of cows without them mooing at the cows. I mean, it's just what people do. But one of the things I always like to remind people is I don't speak cow and I don't speak owl. I'm pretty good at owl, but so I don't know necessarily what that animal is saying to me. If an animal is vocalizing and it's a positive thing and you vocalize back, that could be a very good thing if you're able to mimic that sound. But if we don't know exactly what that animal is saying with their vocalization, and they're saying, I hate you, you're ugly, well, and you vocalize back to them exactly the same way and say, well, I hate you too, well, all of a sudden now, that's a throwdown. And with our birds, or the birds that we have at the sanctuary, if they're making a sound of discomfort and somebody doesn't know that and they replicate that sound back to them, well, that's not going to make them feel good at all. So I always tell people that's something too, that we don't necessarily know what language we're speaking to those birds when we replicate the sounds that they make.
Yeah.
So I guess be cautious. Yeah. Okay. Well, we're a little over time because it was so interesting talking to you, Rob. You got some great stories and great information. We really appreciate that. And wish you the best. And I will, just for you guys to see, I'll show you the website is here, Open Bird Sanctuary, and you guys can go and take a look at that anytime you want, and hopefully you'll go visit Rob and all his great volunteers in Door County sometime. So
yeah, we would love to. And thanks, Paul, for setting all of this up, and thanks for having us. And thank you, all of you out there that have joined us for this presentation and program. I hope everybody was entertained a little bit and learned a little something about raptors and the amazing animals we have. And yeah, if you would ever in the Door County area and would like to visit us at the sanctuary, we'd love to have you come out. You can see us on Facebook. You can go to our website, opendoorbirdsanctuary.org. If you have friends or family or anything that are coming to this area and would enjoy coming to Open Door Bird Sanctuary, please tell them about us. If you would like to support our sanctuary, there's a lot of ways you can do that too. We are a private nonprofit organization. We are volunteer based, and any support that we get, whether it's volunteering or financial support, anything like that, is much appreciated and much accepted. So through the mail, we have adoption programs for our raptors. If you fell in love with one of the birds you saw today, you can adopt one of them, and you can see how to do that on our website. There's lots of different ways you can support memberships of our organization. We do an annual appeal every year, but yeah, one of the best things you can do to help support us is tell people about us, because that means we're doing our mission. The more people that visit us and the more outreach work we can do, we're doing our education mission, and that's a big part of what we do.